This one. Hello everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me along here today to talk to you about our research at the University of Essex. So we've done developing an increasing body of research concerned with the health and well-being benefits of being engaged with natural environments, but also being active in natural environments. So just as a brief outline of what I'm going to talk to you about today, I will firstly talk about the theories linking nature and health and well-being. So just to provide a context for those of you that are not haven't heard of many of these theories before. I'll then talk to you about a couple of key terms that are really important for the presentation. So green exercise and ecotherapy. And I'll then run through a couple of our key grants and key research outputs that we've produced in these areas, and then go on to look at the implications of this research for health and well-being and for the National Health Service. So, our relationship with nature has really changed. If we go back, we have lived and settled and been out in natural environments for many generations, but we've actually only been urbanised for probably 8 to 10 generations. So we were hunter-gatherers, and we traditionally lived out and worked outdoors. So this, we are comfortable in natural surroundings. We feel relaxed and happy when we are in nature. So the biophilia hypothesis suggests that we have an innate sensitivity to affiliate with natural environments. So we have coexisted with them for thousands of generations, and we need them, the natural environments, as much as they need us. So natural settings are hardwired into our genetic makeup. We have traditionally lived as hunter-gatherers, and we have evolved with an affiliation for natural settings. So urban settings are not part of our history, and actually, the way that we have become urbanised today is actually having a big impact on our health and well-being as a result. So when we are close to nature, our well-being improves, and we have an increased likelihood of caring for nature. So if we are, increasingly we are becoming disconnected from natural places, and this is having an impact not only on our health, but also on the environment itself. If people don't have a connection to nature, they are less willing to care for and act for the environment. So it is really an important resource for our health. So there has been a large body of research looking at how nature can contribute to healthy communities. So, as this diagram shows, firstly, if we have in areas where there are lots of nature surrounding where we live, there's actually evidence to suggest it can reduce crime, violence, and levels of aggression in these areas. It can also reduce stress, so not only perceived stress, but objectively measured stress through stress hormones such as cortisol. And it can also restore our mental fatigue. So when we are in nature, we do not necessarily use our directed attention. We use our involuntary attention, which allows our mental assets to be replenished throughout the day. So we don't necessarily, like we are now, hopefully all paying attention. When we're outdoors, we just take in nature, and it doesn't actually fatigue our brains. Nature can also enhance social cohesion, improve social networking and intergenerational links. So when we go out in a natural environment, we connect with other people, we build relationships, we work as a team, and this in itself actually improves well-being just by being with other people. It also provides a sense of belonging, can reduce health inequalities. So in areas with lots of access to nature, there are generally fewer health inequalities in those areas. It also improves our mental health. So there is a real increasing body of evidence showing that nature can improve self-esteem, improve our mood, and it can also have important implications for people suffering from mental ill health, which is something that I'll touch on a bit more later. Now, nature can also facilitate physical activity, which of course we all know is also important for our health and well-being. So it can improve our physical health, make us healthier, fitter. It can reduce the risk of becoming overweight or obese, which is an increasing problem in today's society. It can lower our blood pressure and improve our heart rate variability, which is something, again, I will touch on in more detail. So, as you can see, there's a lot of evidence to say that being out in nature is of benefit to our health and well-being, yet a lot of people today don't actually have any contact with nature, and children especially do not have as much contact as if we go back several generations. They do not have as much contact as their parents had done. So, stemming from the idea that nature can increase our activity levels, in 2005 at the University of Essex we coined the term green exercise, which is defined as physical activity whilst exposed to nature. So this could be a walk in a park, a run through a park, or nature-based activities such as gardening, conservation work. So there's a broad range of different green exercise activities. Now, we hypothesised that there'd be an additional benefit of being physically active in nature above either of these alone. So we conducted a series of, firstly, laboratory studies to try and show the principle of the idea that if you were viewing scenes of nature as opposed to urban scenes whilst walking or running on a treadmill, that there'd actually be more benefits for our self-esteem and mood than the urban environment. And there were actually statistically significant findings showing that when you were just viewing nature whilst walking or cycling, that this was actually much better for your self-esteem and mood than viewing an urban environment with no nature. This led on to a series of field studies and a meta-analysis, all of which can be viewed on our Green Exercise website. And these showed, all different types of green exercise activities. So cycling, running, walking, sailing, horse riding, a broad range of activities in natural environments. All of them contributed to significant improvements in self-esteem and mood, but also that it didn't matter how long you were doing it for or what type of environment it was. So an urban park can improve health and well-being, similarly to a vast area of woodland. So any natural environment is really essential for our health and well-being, and just a 5-minute walk in the park can actually significantly improve our mental health. Now, that is a really important finding, especially given with our busy lifestyles today. We could all probably very easily incorporate 5 minutes of green exercise into our daily activities, and if we all did so, this would have a really significant benefit on the health of the nation. In addition to green exercise, which is an activity for everyone, we have also developed the term ecotherapy or green care, which can be used interchangeably. So this is an umbrella term for a range of nature-based interventions for vulnerable groups. So they are specific facilitated interventions for particular participants rather than simply an experience in nature. So there's actually a broad range of these types of activities ongoing already. Many of you may have heard of care farms, for which there are a growing number throughout the UK. So farms which provide therapeutic activities for vulnerable people, and these include people with a vast range of vulnerabilities, not just mental ill health, but also post-traumatic stress, physical problems, learning difficulties. So they cater for a broad range of people. Other such types of interventions are gardening, horticulture, animal-assisted therapy. So there's a broad range of these types of activities going on, and they are specifically for these people that are suffering from a broad range of illnesses. So they can actually include formal therapy also, but typically they are just a therapeutic intervention aimed to provide health and well-being outcomes. So throughout, you might hear green care or ecotherapy. I'll try and use one, but they're generally used interchangeably. But we are trying to consistently use the term throughout, not just the research in Essex, but throughout the UK, and there is work on this currently. So it'll probably come through as ecotherapy as the main one. So I'll now just talk to you briefly about a couple of green exercise research grants, so activities for everyone, and the findings that we've had. So we had two, at Essex, we had two 3 to 4 year grants based on green exercise. So an ESRC, Early Career Fellowship, and a British Heart Foundation grant, both of which were concerned with looking at the links between nature and stress in terms of both how we react to stress and how we recover from stress. So this area of research is looking at the physical health benefits. So as I said, there's an increasing body of evidence on the mental health benefits, but this is just focused on the physical and physiological health benefits. So this takes us back to the heart rate variability. I'm going to try and explain what this is in the most simple way I can find. I might even confuse myself, which is probably likely. So heart rate variability, just before we go into the studies, is a marker of cardiovascular function which is altered by stress. So every heartbeat that we have, the heart rate variability is the difference in time between those heartbeats. So if we have a higher heart rate variability, this indicates that we have a healthy cardiovascular system which is able to adapt to stimuli from the body, the receptors and the brain. So if our heart rate variability is high, we are resilient and able to adapt to circumstances. If our heart rate variability is low, we have an increased risk of cardiovascular disease. Okay, so when we experience stress, this actually has an impact on our heart rate variability. So when we are under stress, our heart rate variability will reduce, and then when we begin to recover, our heart rate variability will increase once again. However, if we experience prolonged stress, which in today's modern society is very likely, then this can actually have a detrimental effect on our long-term heart rate variability. So these studies aim to look at whether, if we incorporate nature into our lifestyles, whether this can help us to recover from these stresses and increase our heart rate variability back up. So I hope that made that as clear as possible. Okay, so I'm just going to talk to you about two key studies here which have really shown how nature can impact on our recovery from stress. So the first one was a study assessing whether viewing scenes of nature prior to experiencing stress could influence our physiological response to stress, but also our recovery from the stress. So, as part of this study, participants went through a series of different phases. So when they arrived to take part in the study, they signed all of the relevant forms and were fitted with an ECG and finger pressure cuff. So all of this would measure their heart rate, blood pressure, which would allow us to provide a calculation of heart rate variability. The participants then rested for 15 minutes, and during the last 5 minutes of this rest, their physiological responses were measured, so heart rate, blood pressure and heart rate variability. Participants then viewed either urban or rural scenes for 10 minutes, and whatever one they did on the first visit was they did the alternative option on the second visit. After having viewed the scenes, they then were put under a stress test. So a DigiSpan stressor test, which was where they had to remember a series of numbers. So they were shown a series of numbers and they had to type them in. And even if they got them all right, we buzzed to tell them that they'd got it wrong a couple of times, just so they got a bit stressed. And their physiological responses were recorded throughout. And then they had a period of recovery, immediately 5 minutes after, where again their physiological responses were recorded. So these were just an example of the views that we showed them. So they're quite extreme views. So we have the rural, beautiful open spaces, and then the real urban views with absolutely no nature at all. So these are kind of the two extremes, but we do obviously have a lot in between. So firstly, in terms of the results in the response to the stress, as you can see, participants' heart rate and blood pressure increased during the stress test, which is what we would expect, but there were actually no differences between their response whether they'd viewed urban or rural scenes before. So they were equally stressed. I mean, it wasn't significantly different, but if you look closely at the data, then their kind of heart rate and blood pressure increased by less, but that wasn't a significant finding. But, it's a pattern of response that they might actually have had fewer physiological responses. Now, in recovery, we have a really interesting finding. So, as you can see in the built environment, which is the grey one, this is a measure of heart rate variability. It actually reduced slightly from baseline to recovery, so that's actually a worse. As we said, lower heart rate variability is a risk for cardiovascular disease, but if we look in the nature, it's actually significantly increased from baseline during the recovery. So it's actually a significantly higher heart rate variability in the natural environment, which indicates that it actually plays a really important role in allowing us to recover from stress. So they've actually recovered from the stress physiologically to a greater extent, and in fact the participants that viewed the built environment have actually had a reduction, so they haven't actually recovered at all from those horrible pictures. This leads us on to the second study, which aimed to look how a walk in nature can influence our recovery whilst we sleep. So the first study showed that, immediately, in our immediate recovery period, a nature scene is actually better, but what about in the long term? So in this study, participants were randomly assigned to a 1.8 kilometre route of either a natural or built environment. Again, similarly to before, the built environment was, had as few natural areas as possible. And again, on the second visit, they did the alternative ones, which they hadn't done before. We kept a similar pace on both walks so that the exercise, it wasn't that they were doing a lot more exercise in one than the other, so it was paced by someone who was leading the walks, and they wore this. After the walks, they were given the sensors to wear overnight, so it's similar to a heart rate monitor which they wear, and it records their blood pressure, etc., all overnight. And this allows us to provide a measure again of heart rate variability. Now, 3 10-minute segments were selected by an independent reviewer to be analysed for each person, and these were 1 to 2 hours after participants had fallen asleep. So this represents approximately phase 4 of our sleep. So when we're in, we've reached not early stages of sleep, we've reached a deeper stage of sleep. And interestingly, these studies again found that heart rate variability was significantly higher when participants had walked in nature as opposed to a built environment. So this is telling us that not only during the immediate stages of recovery has it impacted on our physiological response, but also it can last longer term, up to 12 hours after their heart rate variability was still improving, and they were still recovering to a greater extent than those in the built environment. So just as a quick summary of these two studies, firstly, the research provides ecologically valid evidence that nature reduces physiological stress and enhances recovery from stress. So, today when we are all probably stressed a great deal of the time, just simply going for a walk before, after work could actually have a massive impact on our recovery during the night. So the physiological effects may last for more than 12 hours, which is a really important finding. And therefore, green exercise might, provide an essential recovery and restoration, which will have a significant impact on our health. So these are really quite novel, these studies, in terms of green exercise and the effects on physiological health. And they are first studies of their kind to really show how nature can play a real role in helping us recover from stress. Okay, so this takes us on to the more ecotherapy side of our research, so the interventions for vulnerable groups. So this was a long-term project that we did with Mind, looking at different types of ecotherapy and their effect on wellbeing. So it's the first study of different types of ecotherapy in the UK. So the studies included lots of different ecotherapy interventions, so like I said, gardening, animal-assisted therapy, care farming, so a broad range of activities. And we looked at both the longitudinal and acute effect. So we've actually, as you can see from the diagram, there were 3 key themes throughout the whole of the evaluation, which was well-being, social inclusion and connection to nature. But we split our study into 2 different approaches. So we had an all-project study where we had over 500 participants from 52 different ecotherapy projects, and a within and between approach. So we had participants that had completed lots of questionnaires and some that had completed some, and we analysed all of this data. and then an in-depth study, which was 300 participants from just 9 projects, where we looked at their changes over time, so from the start to the end of the project, which they might be involved in for a year, for example, and a change in just one session, so just one session of whatever activity they were doing. And within both the studies, we had recognised outcome measures. So in the in-depth study, we used more standardised measures, but equally in the all-project study, we had measures of connection to nature and social inclusion, but these were sometimes made simpler from the standardised measures, just so that due to the vulnerable nature of some of the participants, we had to make sure that we had questionnaires that could be completed by everybody. So in terms of the all-project study, where the 500 participants from 52, we found just from the start to the end of their involvement, so this could be a short period as 12 weeks up to a year maybe, they had a significant increase in positivity, connection with nature, and their health and well-being. So these scales were generally on a kind of rate on the scale of 1 to 10, how healthy you feel, that sort of thing. So these all significantly improved in participants, and they're all correlated with each other. So this kind of suggests that the more connected we become with nature, the more our health can improve. So it's not just about being in nature, it's about developing this connection with nature that can help to improve our health. And now in the in-depth study, where we used the kind of more standardised measures, as you can see, there's a significant increase in well-being over the course of the programme, and a significant increase in self-esteem, which was measured at 3 different time points. So these, participants many of whom were experiencing self-esteem issues, depression, long-term homelessness, a broad range of people, they actually experienced significant improvements in how they felt about themselves and how well they felt, which is a really important finding. These groups of people have often been suffering over the long-term period, and have found that just, one session or a period of sessions of these sorts of activities can have a big impact on their health and well-being. There was also a significant increase in social inclusion, which, as we can all probably imagine, social inclusion is a big issue for people that are suffering from mental health or physical illnesses. They often feel isolated. So by doing these projects, they're actually feeling more included in the community, they're meeting other people, and that's all obviously having an impact on their well-being. And they also had a significant increase in connection to nature, as with the all-project study. So, as a summary of those interventions, firstly, they encourage physical activity, which obviously impacts on our health, but they also increased participants' self-esteem, mood and well-being, increased connection to nature, which allows us to give back to nature. Like I said before, if we're connected to it, we will act to protect it, and improve it. It increased the self-perceived health, environmentally friendly behaviour, and facilitated social contact, social inclusion, and reduced social isolation. And it helped participants to build a capacity and ability to cope with stressful life events and a sense of place. Now, it's really difficult to get across the kind of multiple health benefits that they've received from these, just from the few graphs I've put up. Yes, their health and well-being was improved, but it's all of these factors that actually contribute to that: the social inclusion, the meeting other people, the development of skills. So, as we were saying, a lot of, for example, the people that were suffering from mental ill health, they might be given antidepressant drugs as their prescription, but that doesn't actually, it might help to improve their depression like ecotherapy would, but it doesn't provide all of the other benefits that these kind of interventions do: the meeting people, the developing skills which can lead to jobs in the future, teamwork, all of these sorts of activities. You can't get all of those benefits from a drug, that you're just given. This is really essential to health and well-being. There's a really important way that we could help to reduce the cost to the NHS and actually help people to not just improve their health, but also recover and be resilient in the future. So, what are the implications of all this research? Well, green exercise and ecotherapy can improve public health and well-being. It can build resilience for those at risk of developing mental ill health, so not just the people that are vulnerable, but for all of us. we are all, they say 1 in 2 people will experience depression, so in some way we are all at such a risk. So just a walk in a park could really help to prevent us from developing some of these issues. And it's also a treatment option for people with existing mental health problems, but also a variety of other problems, learning difficulties, homelessness, all of this. So, it is also an enjoyable option. So there's evidence to suggest that actually when people go to an outdoor exercise program, that their adherence to the program is much greater than a gym-based program. People are more motivated to go outdoors and exercise, and they actually carry it on. And there's also evidence to suggest that, for example, if we go for a run through a park and we do the equivalent amount of exercise, the exact same intensity run indoors, that we actually find it much easier outdoors, even though it's no different. So this is a really important way of getting people to exercise without thinking that they're actually doing a lot, which is kind of half the battle probably. So it is efficient. Like I said, there's multiple outcomes simultaneously. So it is, it's wider than just clinical outcomes, which of course are essential, but it's also providing all of these other benefits that you wouldn't get from a lot of other treatments. It's cost effective. How much, millions of pounds are spent every year on providing, antidepressant drugs, billions even. So, just by providing some of these activities which are already going on, just by sending people to them instead of giving them antidepressant drugs, we could save a lot of money to the NHS. And like I said, it reduces social isolation. They leave the diagnosis at the gate. And these sorts of projects, people have got lots of different vulnerabilities, but it's not about that. It's just about being engaged in these activities. So, in conclusion, the natural environment, green exercise, natural spaces are an important resource for human health. So we need to actively protect it, both for now and for future generations, to ensure we have a good health and well-being, and that we have the opportunity to access these environments. It reduces public health costs by promoting healthier communities. And the real key thing that we need to do now is to engage commissioners and GPs in the idea that this is a really effective treatment, but also a preventative tool. Now, this work is ongoing. We have done some work with commissioners. We've done a report that's due to be released soon on care farming, working with commissioners and how we can actually engage them with with prescribing to care farms, is due to be released soon, and it's found some really interesting findings about the key ways in which we can engage with all these parties. So that's ongoing, but this is really the key thing that we need to do. We need to engage commissioners and health and social care in supporting these initiatives. We need to promote it to GPs, and we also need to call upon the National Institute for Clinical Excellence to actually recommend ecotherapy interventions as a treatment option. Now, if we look in the NICE guidelines for physical activity, there is actually some reference to natural environments for physical activity, so we are making progress, but there's still a lot of work to be done in this area, and some areas are really engaged and other areas don't commission to these sorts of activities. So it's really an ongoing piece of work that is essential for the future of health and well-being. So we really need to think about a natural health service in addition to a national health service. Thank you very much.